Hi everyone, this is Deb Chamberlain with the Awakened Artist, another soul tuning session, and today I have a really awesome friend of mine here. Her name is Ilene Angel. Welcome, Ilene.
Deb, how are you?
Ilene is up in New York City, and Ilene and I have known each other probably about 30 years,
Oh my God.
maybe
That's
25, somewhere in there. And I met Ilene, you were a voice student of mine, right? Is that how I
Yep.
first met you, a singing student when I was in New York? And Ilene is an amazing, when I say amazing, songwriter. I put her CD in, which we'll get to in a little bit, in the car on a long drive I went on with my sister. And I said, we're not going to talk, we're just going to listen. And my sister was crying after every song in a good way, a good cry. It was so amazing. I just loved how she got every word. So, and Ilene is also an author, twice now, a singer, um, and a lot of other things. And I'm trying to talk her into being a stand-up comic too. So I want people to get a sense of you, like how I know you. So talk about your life. Like you grew up in Yonkers,
I,
right?
yeah, I grew
And
up in Yonkers.
what did you get into in the arts? What did you start out with? How
I
old were you?
started out, gosh, playing piano from the time I was like 3 years old.
Wow.
I would pick out little, yeah, I know. I would, I would pick out little tunes on the piano and floor people that, whatever notes I was hitting was an actual melody. And so one day, my brother's guitar teacher, who came to the house and taught, like, was a jack of all trades and taught many instruments, saw this little, like, toddler picking out notes and like melodies, and he convinced my parents that I should have piano lessons,
Wow.
and they were like, she can't even read. Like she's a toddler. What But I I did. They gave me piano lessons, and I read music before I read words. So I
Wow.
always say music is my first language, but it actually is. So yeah, so that's kind of I started with that, and then I started writing songs by the time I was like 9.
Shut up.
I'm serious. I didn't say they were good songs.
Okay.
They were songs. But they were still angst ridden, even at 9.
Oh, wow. Poor child.
I know exactly.
They forced you to do all that. So then, like, just keep telling us your story. So then what? And then what?
But so I started writing songs. I was, still in single digits, and by the time I was about 12 or 13, I went to a performing arts camp, and my best friend there convinced I played her my songs, and she was like, "You have to play them for people," and I thought, "Oh God, no," and and I'd never done that. And she went and spoke to the music director. This is really a true story. Um, and she said, you have to hear these songs, and like Ilene needs to perform them. And so I played them for him, and I wound up doing that, and that like totally changed the course of my life, because it's a very attractive drug, having people love this thing that you have to say and share with the world,
Yeah.
and especially at like such a young age, to have people respond to that
Yeah.
forever changed the
Do
course
you
of my life.
remember any of those songs, those first songs?
I Not vaguely. I don't like remember anything in totality, but
Do you have anything written down or recorded?
I'm sure that I do actually. I'm sure I have like scraps of paper and notebooks and stuff, because I've not
Hmm.
started with them.
Maybe
So,
our next video.
oh God, no, not the early one.
Oh, come on, please. Please. I know everybody wants to hear at least one or a snippet of one.
Oh
Please
God. Well, I will look for them.
look for them.
I
Okay,
will.
cool. Moving on. So
Moving
then
on.
what?
So, and I was like, being in New York, I loved musical theater and was exposed to it because my parents listened to, record albums in the basement and all that kind of thing. And so, and I don't think I really had, like, I think at that point in time in our society, things weren't as compartmentalized in terms of genres of music or what, like, to me, it was all music, or it was all,
Okay.
it was just all stuff I loved. Like, there was really no difference between listening to a pop song on the radio or like musical theater record or whatever.
Mhm.
didn't really separate. But I also studied classical music,
Hmm.
and that's mostly because like that was my mother's great love. I wound up singing like opera, which I hated. By the way. And finally one day said, why am I doing that? But yeah, so I like through high school was like did musicals and still was playing and writing songs and all of that kind of thing, and doing classical music, which is what I went to college for. And not the most practical thing, like it's not an MBA, but
Oh,
but
I'm with you. I'm with you, girl.
like why?
I
Um,
know.
but it was great and fun nonetheless. And I was writing. It's interesting because I never considered, like, from the time I started, especially performing my own songs, like that was kind of it for me, and how I thought of myself from there on out, like only as a songwriter or a singer songwriter. And I didn't entertain that I was still writing other kinds of things, or that I could. Like, it's just sort of like, this is how I saw myself, Ilene equals songwriter, period. And when I was in college, one of my English comp professor called me in one day for a serious talking to, because she was like, you're a writer. Like, you need to like switch majors. Nice with the music stuff, but what are you doing? And I completely forgot this conversation until,
Wow.
like, 30 years later, when I was writing my first book. I totally blanked it out, because at the time, when you're 18 or 19, nobody can tell you anything. You're just,
Hmm.
you're going to do what you want to do. And I wanted to perform, and music was the thing for me, even though I was writing. And so,
Do you think at that time that it also kind of felt like she was saying, don't do music?
yeah, she was. I mean, she was saying, you're a
Yeah.
writer
That's
at
really
core.
hard to hear as someone whose whole life started as a musician.
Right, exactly. And I completely disregarded it, and discounted it and forgot about it until years later, when I was actually writing a book. And I went, oh, wait, somebody once told me I was a writer and I should do that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting because sometimes it's because of what we're told or what we're given when we're young. And other times it's our own defining ourselves, where we put ourselves into a little box, when there's this whole big world, that there's so many ways to express ourselves, and there's so many dimensions to us. And it's only as I'm older that I look at other artists and say, if you're an artist in one thing, more than likely you're an artist in more than one thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of it's sort of interesting how I, put myself in this one little thing and just saw myself here. And it wasn't until many, many years later that I, entertained the possibility that I was more than that. And
Mm-hmm. Do you
so,
think sometimes it's like a garden, like these master gardens who have like flowers that blossom in the spring and flowers that blossom all summer and then in the fall, and then I think that there's just a time and a season for when we're ready to blossom?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's a time we're ready to hear certain things,
Yeah.
or entertain certain possibilities. And then I think that there are times when we're just closed off to the
Yeah.
idea, and there's
Yeah.
nothing going to get in
So
when
what
that.
happened after college? So then you start writing?
Yeah, well, after college, I still was doing classical music. I moved back to New York, and I was taking like studying opera at Juilliard, of all things. And I
Wow.
had this epiphany that if my life was finite, which all of them are, that I was writing pop songs, and I wanted to do that. Like, I wanted to play and sing my songs, and I finally just had enough one day, and that was the end of the classical everything in my life. And that was it. I just moved forward and said, this is what I want to do. I want to write songs. I want to, play them, sing them, pitch them for other artists,
Hmm.
and do all of that. But I had been spending years of my life in the classical world, and this was a
Yeah.
whole other ball of wax.
So then you spent time living in New York, taking songwriting classes, doing all that, right?
Yes, I
And
did.
then you moved to Nashville?
I did. I went, I love, this is the thing too. Like, you're talking about planting gardens, and this blooms here and this blooms there. I think always that, like, when we wind up in some place that we sort of think is unexpected. If you look back at your life, you can see where the seeds for that came
Right.
from.
Right.
And but it's not just like, I didn't wake up one day and go, hey, I'm going to write country music. I was like, listening to Reba McEntire records or whatever as a kid. So I was doing, I loved country. I loved, I loved pop. I loved theater. I loved and I still sort of, it was all one big mishmash to me. And so I went to Nashville in 1990 something. And it was this incredible thing where I went there with I had one meeting set up. I didn't know anybody. It was just, and that was because it was a favor from somebody else. And I wound up having 5 meetings and signing a few of my songs to single song deals. And by the second time I went to Nashville, I decided to move there.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy, it wasn't, some ways it was an impetuous decision, and other ways it was made perfect sense.
Right. And while you were there, you met a woman, Sue Fabish, right?
Oh yeah, I did.
And you wrote a song together.
We did.
And tell us about that.
Yeah. So Sue and I met through a mutual friend, Lorraine, and she and we totally hit it off. And she's funny, she's wonderful, I adore her. And so we started to write together. And at one point I had an opportunity to write something to pitch for a movie, and a kids movie. And
yay!
My first foray into doing that. And I'll talk about more about that later. But so she and I wrote this song, and we pitched it, and it got in the movie, and it was a #1 Disney song.
Can you tell us?
It was called I Don't Think About It, and it was recorded by Emily Osment, who played the best friend on the TV show Hannah Montana.
Oh, right, of Hannah Montana, Miley Cyrus, right?
Right.
That's a pretty big deal.
It was a big deal. That show was the hugest thing at the time.
At the time, it was huge, yeah.
And it was a really big deal. And so that was just again, a whole different thing, and a whole, it was a really great lesson for me on things coming in the unexpected ways, the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
God knows all the other things I tried, and other pitches and country. And so I moved to Nashville and got a pop Disney cut in LA. And
yeah. See, but if you hadn't been in Nashville, it wouldn't have happened.
Wouldn't have happened.
So there you go. So there's this whole other life you have, which is you're an adamant political junkie.
Total political junkie. And when I moved, but interestingly enough, I had never actually gotten involved and worked on anything politically
right.
outside of voting.
But you did follow somebody for years who you wrote a book about.
Right. So I was so actually what happened was when I was living in Nashville, I was going on a bunch of horrible blind dates that were made for good comedy, but not much else. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, and he was single at the time, that I have more in common on paper with George Stephanopoulos than I do any of these people I'm actually dating. And were it not for the fact that he was George Stephanopoulos, it would make a great deal of sense. So I decided to put the 6 degrees of separation to the test. And at the time I had a day job and working in the communications branch of the Methodist Church, which was hilarious for the Jewish girl from New York. But be that as it may, I would tell people, but we were a communications thing is the point of that. So there were TV studios where I worked, and they had things, and there was, and so I told everybody of my desire to meet George, because I didn't want to just meet him. I wanted to be introduced to him somehow, not like crazy stalker fan, like, somebody who knew him. But who did I know that knew George Stephanopoulos? Nobody. But I just started to tell, anybody who would listen, that I wanted to meet him, and ask if anybody knew him. And what ensued was a series of events where I would almost, but then not meet George.
You can't say any more than that, because then you're going to spoil the book. So then you ended up taking all of this fun history, and you wrote a book called
In Search of George Stephanopoulos.
And it's funny. I love the book. I loved it. So then you came back, you had a hit song, you had a book, you moved back to New York.
well, what happened, I have to add one little thing about the journey of the book, because this is key to everything else. And when I was trying to get a book deal for that book, somebody told me, a publisher told me I needed to start a blog. And blogs were not the thing that they are now. They were
Right.
really, I didn't know what the heck it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so I called up a young whippersnapper cousin and said, what's a blog and how do I start one? Because they suggested I needed to get a following. And so I started my blog and called it In Search Of, because my book was In Search of George Stephanopoulos, and it was to gain a fan base. But I also, I had gotten started getting involved in politics at that point in Nashville, and I had volunteered and worked on, at least the 96 election and then 2000. And so because 2000, Al Gore's headquarters were in Nashville. And so it was a great experience and chance to do that. So I was writing about politics when I started, because I didn't really know. And I was writing about anything I could think of, American Idol, whatever.
Right.
Mind. I wrote about it. And so I started getting a following, and people kept saying, you should really write about politics. Like, you should write for Huffington Post, which at the
Oh,
time
yeah.
was owned
Right.
and run
Forgot
by
about that.
was owned and run by Ariana Huffington. And so I did. I was like, well, I don't know anybody at Huffington Post. How's that going to happen? And so I again just put it out there. This is a lesson in my life. Is just, if you want something, say it. Just tell everybody, and somehow some opportunity is going to come your way unexpectedly. That's going to lead you in a different path. So all that to say, when I moved, I kept writing, and I still write the blog. And then I started writing for Huffington Post, and that took me in different directions too. And so when I moved back to New York, there was kind of that little voice inside me that said, because I moved back to look after my father, who was elderly and by himself, and there was something in me that said, your career is not going to suffer for making the right choice in your life, for you.
Good. That's great.
And it didn't, but it's been interesting since then. But that is kind of, everything sort of has interacted with one another. But the blog has led to a lot of interesting introductions.
So back in New York.
In all of the years and the transitioning from locations or whatever, I wound up spending most of my time pitching my songs, not singing them myself, not making my own record, not doing some of these things. And what happened was, I decided one day that I couldn't chase anything anymore. There was just something in me that stopped and said, you're not going to take like one step forward until you honor what it is you truly want to do and be and who you are.
Can you show us what that was now?
Sure. And so I made this lovely CD called In Color, and that's the whole song of it. And it was a labor of love. It took 3 years. My friend Tanya Leah produced it. And thanks to my blog and Huffington Post, which is why I mentioned it, there's a duet on there with Kenny Loggins.
What's it called?
The duet is called Friends Like Me and You.
Yep.
So there's a YouTube video and all that stuff. And anyway, so I wound up making this after, a lifetime of doing other things, and still play and sing it. And actually the title song is also, there's a music and theater school called Nickery Studios and Productions, and this is In Color is their theme song. Actually.
Wow.
They sing it, and all the kids
for
know
everything.
it.
That's amazing.
And, yeah.
Well, that's the CD that my sister and I cried to on our long distance.
On your mom.
You have to look sideways. We have the same angle.
Oh yeah. It was shocking.
So you have this, and then we're going to talk about this in another video. During all this time, you also supported yourself doing transcription, right, of audio, and you got to listen to all these like personal growth things, right?
Yes, I did transcription for a lot of years to pay the bills, and
right.
The interesting thing is you get exposed to so much
so much stuff. Yeah.
So yeah, so I got to hear whether it was lectures on different kinds of therapy or meditation or,
Awesome.
you know, like all kinds of things that really that
So you were
impact.
consuming all of this positive, nurturing, really great feeling stuff and getting paid for it. And it all of that, along with all of your life experiences, inspired you to write another book, which is called,
Which is called How to Calm the Hell Down and Be Happy.
show us the cover. I love the cover. How to
Purple.
calm down.
The purple guy is by a Nashville artist named Brian Nash. And
Awesome.
I just love
So we're
it.
going to talk about that book in another video, in our next video. I wanted to, so basically I want people to get a sense of who you are and what you're about. And you, to me, are the epitome of what I call an awakened artist, which is what a lot of my work is about now, supporting artists who want to wake up to our full potential as whole, and, you know, with our wholeness, who we are in our core, in our soul. We're ready to wake up and live in the light, stop living in the victim mentality, and to really live in the light, in love, in compassion, first for ourselves and then for others, and to create art that also helps to resonate and activate those frequencies in other people's sleeping consciousness. You know, kind of like when you're asleep and somebody comes in and starts making noise and you start to sort of wake up. Well, I'm all about creating art, music, dance, theater, books, comedy, all kinds of artistic expression that starts to activate those higher frequencies in people: compassion, love, lightheartedness, forgiveness, acceptance, all these things. So I just see artists as healers right now on the planet, like people who we have the capacity to really touch people in that very private, intimate place inside of them where they don't really let even the people in their own lives in, but yet they'll let art in. They'll let the message of art into their soul, into their spirit, into their heart, right? So I think that's the purpose of art, and that's why I'm all about supporting artists to become more awakened.
Right.
So I just think you're the epitome of that. How do you resonate with that, what I'm talking about with your art? Do you feel like that's what drives you with your creating?
Absolutely. I think that, you know, for me, like I became aware that, you know, that I write about things that matter to me, that are not just, you know, not to belittle, but that are not just like a love song or a he said, she said, whatever, that I write about what matters or how I see things or what distresses me greatly or what lifts me up or what I see as the potential for the world, you know. And I think that the more authentic I am in when I do that, the more it resonates with people. I
Yeah.
think the more I'm willing to be vulnerable, you know, the greater impact anything has. And I know for myself that what that like is the prime thing that matters to me, like people reconnecting with themselves because they hear a song, you know. From my standpoint, like songs for me at their best have always made me feel understood and less alone in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
I was clear from a very young age that I wanted to do that for other people.
It's
So
awesome.
in that regard, that's what drives me. I think
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, we're all doing the best we can and floating around out here and trying to make sense of things, and to know that somebody else gets it, that, you know,
Yeah.
that you're understood, that, you
Right.
know, that you share that.
Yeah.
um
I used to think Carole King wrote songs just for me. And there's a lot of art out there that I think preys off of, and I'm meaning PREY, preys off of our dark side, of our shadow. And it really is like just tries to, I don't know, I think it appeals to our addictive personalities, you know. Like, for me, the purpose of it is for somebody to make money. But I don't think it adds to the evolution of humanity. I don't think it adds to our waking up.
right.
And I think it causes us, in the cumulative sense, to suffer and to stay asleep longer to who we really are. And
Right.
I think most people really want to wake up to who we really are. They're just afraid to, because it's the unknown. You know, you got to look at the unknown, which we're going to get into when we talk about your book. So I just love your life. You're just like a real person. You live and create from your soul, from your truth, from your authenticity, like you said. And I really think that that's what people are wanting and craving right now. And I hope that people will get curious and want to read your books and listen to your CD. Where can they find your CD?
Uh, they can find physical CDs on CD Baby. They can download it on iTunes, Amazon, and every other digital outlet that there is, pretty much. So,
Awesome. And it's Ilene, Ilene Angel, and that's your actual last name.
it's really my name.
Not your pen name. And it's In Color is the CD.
Yes.
And In Search of George Stephanopoulos is book 1. And How to Calm the Hell Down and Be Happy is book number 2. And we'll talk about that in our next video.
Great.
So is there anything you want to close this video with that you want to?
Well, thank you for having me, for starters.
Well, it is just for starters, so there's going to be more. And Ilene is in our Awakened Artist group on Facebook. So if you want to talk to her, you can go in the Awakened Artist group. And she also has her own pages on Facebook that you can follow and like. So, all right. Well, let's do some more of this. And for now, we're going to say goodbye. And thanks for agreeing to do this with me. I'm so happy we got to do this.
Me too.
All right. Talk soon.
Okay.
Bye.